This is Eric Thomas. I'm the guy who wrote LISTSERV 25 years ago. And we are here to celebrate LISTSERV's 25th anniversary. I have some champagne here, but I'm not allowed to open it until I've told you the story of the 25 years of LISTSERV. So it all began in 1986. At the time I was a student in Paris. I was 20 years old. And you have to bear in mind how things were back then. The IBM PS2 had not been invented yet. The computer mouse had been invented, but most computers still did not have a mouse. Most computers were text only, they were not graphical. And you were still able to read a normal text document without squinting because they had not invented the ultra-small fonts yet. And back then, we had this computer network, which we didn't call the internet just yet. It was kind of called the ARPANET, and my part was called BitNet. And on BitNet, we connected across the Atlantic. We connected the United States and Europe with two redundant connections running at 9.6 kilobits per second each, you know, like the old modems. And most of the things we used the network for, basically, it was mail and instant messaging. We already had instant messaging at the time. That's actually when relay was invented. And the problem was, of course, that it was very slow. And the reason it was very slow was mailing lists, because there were many people on them, and they generated a lot of traffic. And people started flame wars, and they started calling each other names, and the traffic spiked, and suddenly the links were full, and you couldn't get your mail through. And I thought that there has to be a better solution than that. I also thought that it doesn't make sense for a single human being to manually manage a list with thousands of people. Take me off your list, add me to the list, I'm still waiting, blah, 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 has nobody seen my message, and so on. So I wrote LISTSERV in one weekend, and I thought that this would just be a project for one weekend. I would solve that problem. I would also have LISTSERV servers in the United States and in Europe, and they would only send one copy of each message between the two continents, so that we would solve the problem of these overloaded lines, which costed millions of dollars. I mean, we couldn't increase the capacity. And I thought I was going to do all that in one weekend. I thought I would just change the world, and then tomorrow would be a new day. Well, and here I am, 25 years later. So people sometimes ask me, you know, well, Eric, 25 years, it's an eternity, you know, it's how many dog years is that for the internet? And what do you think is the reason why LISTSERV has survived all along? And I think the reason LISTSERV has survived all along is that email has not only survived but thrived during all this time. Because email allows people, of course, to communicate one-on-one like many other forms of technology, but email allows people to form virtual communities, which is something, the need of the human being to form a community, to share experiences, to share joys and pain and everything with fellow human beings is one of the fundamental needs of the human being. It's what differentiates mankind and so on from lower animals and so on. And this is something you can do with LISTSERV. And of course, the technology has not remained static. In 1986, an email message was probably about one or two screens. It was plain text. There was only one font. There was no bold, no italics, no nothing. And the web had not been invented. And today, of course, we have attachments. We have fancy pages, clickable images, and embedded videos, and so on and so forth. And today, you can read your mail on one of these in the subway while getting to work, and you can delete your spam, and then you can, of course, we didn't have spam back then. That was the good thing. So we've come quite far since 1986, and when I look ahead, I see that we do still have a long way to go. We have to get rid of these spammers. You know, I don't know how, but we just have to find a way to get rid of these guys. And we also need to. People often talk about email and text messages on a cell phone, social networks, instant messaging as competitors. And that could not be more wrong. When I started using the net, we had instant messaging and we had email. And you used instant messaging for things that were more social, less important, or you used instant messaging because your email had not arrived yet, and that was the only way to talk to somebody in real time. These were the two main uses. And back then, the people who paid for the network had gotten this really good idea. Let's ban instant messaging from the network, because they've seen a report showing that it was 1/3 of the traffic, and they figured if we can, it's millions of dollars. If we could save 1/3 of that, that would be a fortune. Let's ban instant messaging. And we tech guys had to fight really hard. I remember saying some perhaps not so polite things to some of these guys. And in the end, we won, and we got the instant messaging to stay there. And we did that even though we were the email guys. We were the guys who thought that email was the future. But we thought that instant messaging was so important that it had to continue. And I think the same goes with text messaging, social networks. They complement email. A text message is nothing more than a certain form of email message limited to 160 text characters and sent over a cell phone network instead of TCP/IP and so on. But it's basically just the same thing. You're sending a message to somebody, and he's going to read it when it pleases him, and he may answer or he may not, or he may just absorb the information. Now, social networks are a little bit different because they are a more fundamentally complex form of interaction. You're putting something out there in the hope and assumption that your friends are going to read it. Then what happens is that there's a big artificial intelligence system that tries to figure out which of your friends want to see which of your messages. And it's not really very good at that. A lot of your friends will say, hey, what are you talking about? I didn't see this posting on your wall, but now that I open your wall, I see it's right here. Well, that's because it was never shown to them, because the computer decided that they are probably not interested. So you plaster your wall with all these things. You're hoping people will see them, and many of them do, but many don't. And they may comment, and they can comment. It's very easy to comment. The threshold to making a comment is very low. All you have to do is you can click like. You can also click like. Or you just type your command, you hit return, and that's it. And you move to the next entry in your feed, and so on. So it's something that makes it very easy to have quick, spur-of-the-moment comments on something you've said. But it doesn't really invite thoughtful, in-depth comments, and you've only got 400 characters anyway. All this to say that I think all these forms of communication need to coexist, and just because you work with email doesn't mean that you're against any of the other form of communications. They all work together in a mesh. And perhaps what lies ahead in the long term is that we'll be able to create a uniform mesh of all these forms of technology so that everything is available from the same interface. So you don't have to switch between your email client and your web browser and your phone and so on. You can access everything from everywhere and always select the most appropriate form of communication for the message you're trying to deliver. So this brings me to the next version of LISTSERV, which will be called 17.0. It will be available next year. And our focus this year has been on social networks. So you will find that most of the improvements between 16.0, the current version, and the new version will be to not only to interface with social networks. I mean, there will be a Facebook button, a Twitter button, and so on. But I mean, that's very basic. We are also going to try and present a traditional LISTSERV list with a view that people who are used to social networks will find familiar, comfortable, and intuitive. So you will be able to get the best of both worlds. You'll have the experience of a social network, but you'll also have the depth of LISTSERV, which allows you to send a full email message. You're not limited to 400 characters. You can send attachments, and so on and so on. When you're on Facebook, unless your attachment is a video or a photo, there's not really a way to include it, and so on. And that's going to be our focus for the year to come. Okay, so in 1993, I decided to start a company to commercialize the product and to port it from the original mainframe environments to Unix and Windows and VMS at the time. And I went to the government offices here in Stockholm, and I was told that since I'm a foreigner and I don't have a business degree, I only have an engineering degree, and I was only 26. I was too young, I was too stupid, I couldn't start a company in Sweden. But if I wanted to, I would be allowed to start a pizzeria. And I got upset, I got on the first plane to New York City, I started my company there. But back then it was basically just a piece of paper that said LISTSERV International and some stamp from a government office in the United States. And when I started recruiting people, I realized that New York was probably not the best place to start a company because of the cost of living in Manhattan. I mean, you just can't find any cheap manpower there. And also, I had some connections in Washington, D.C., and Washington, D.C. at the time happened to be the hub of the internet for the East Coast. So this is where I started the company. In 1994, in the basement of a home in Bethesda, actually. Where we returned later to start a new office. So in the 80s, in the 90s, during the dot boom, we were all a bunch of young kids, and we had great visions. We were idealists, and we wanted to be heroes. We wanted to change the world. We wanted to be the new generation that brought the new technology to the planet and improve society and so on. And we did all that. And then one day we realized we were 20 years older than 20 years ago, 25 years, I'm sorry. You know, and then we realized the internet was started to turn into a commodity. And that, frankly, if you spent your entire life living and breathing the internet, that's not fun. That's not something you want to hear. You look at ISPs today, they're a commodity. You look at the backup software, it's pretty much a commodity. And so our role in a company like LISTSERV, you try to stay ahead of the wave, of the commoditization wave. You try to be always one step ahead so that what you do doesn't turn into a commodity where it doesn't really matter from which company you buy it as long as the price is the lowest and so on. And I think at LISTSERV we've succeeded. But a lot of my colleagues, I meet them and they, you know, it's not as fun as it used to be. But we don't have that problem at LISTSERV because we are one step ahead. Can I open now? Okay, so in celebration of the 25th anniversary of LISTSERV, I am going to personally open this Magnum, if I manage. Where's my Swiss Army knife when I need it? There we go. So if you open this correctly, you should barely hear the noise. That's what we say in France anyway. It's a Magnum though. I think it's been shaken. Ooh, not good. I think that we'll have to do. So, cheers, 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 cheers.